Hi, it's Gwyn and welcome back to the channel where we like to take a deep dive into the world of the Beatles, their music, their legacy and everything else in between. Today we're tackling a very special subject, the promotional films made for their 1966 single Paperback Writer and Rain. These films represent a key turning point in the Beatles' history and in the evolution of the video as a musical form. Yes, you could argue that these are among the very first music videos in the modern sense of the word. So we're going to look at why these films were made, how they were made, the location, directors and the different versions, and what they look like and what they tell us about the band at that moment in time, and why they still matter today. So sit back, hit those like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already done so, and let's dig into these iconic pieces of Beatles visual history. So let's look at the context. Why did the Beatles make these promo films? By 1966, the Beatles' fame had reached unprecedented levels and the business of promoting their records was evolving. They had become so huge at this point that appearing on live or doing TV performances became increasingly difficult and time-consuming. According to director Michael Lindsay Hogg, the band realised that instead of always having to go to television studios to mime their performance, they could create films of themselves miming the songs and send those out to the various media outlets worldwide. That would obviously save the logistic hassle, security problems, and allowed for them to have a much greater creative control. So, for the single Paperback Writer and Rain, the Beatles decided to shoot multiple promo films, what we would today call music videos. This was pretty innovative for the time and still very new in 1966, and marks a shift in how bands could represent themselves visually. So let's look at some of the facts. The songs were recorded during the sessions for the album Revolver. The recordings of this current set of songs at the time reflected a more adventurous sound, and the promo films were made on the 19th and the 20th of May 1966. The promo films were directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg, an up-and-coming director of the time. They shot both indoor studio versions at EMI's Studio 1 at Abbey Road, and outdoor location versions were filmed in the grounds of Chiswick House in West London. The colour footage was shown in black and white on British TV since colour broadcasting wasn't standard at the time, but colour versions were utilised in the US market. So the stage was set. The Beatles were entering the next phase, bigger, more global, more visual, and these films were part of that. So first off, let's look at Paperback Writer and the films for that song. So Michael Lindsay Hogg's original idea that he took towards the Beatles was very much a narrative story. The Beatles would be working in a newspaper office and Paul wanting to write a paperback novel, etc. Manager Brian Epstein, however, preferred something much simpler, just showing the boys performing, as he said. So the narrative concept was shelved and the final film focused on performance, though still very visually interesting. So as regards the filming schedule, on 19th of May 1966, at EMI Studios in Abbey Road, they filmed the indoor versions. And on the 20th of May 1966, they moved to Chiswick House and its gardens. Here they filmed colour footage on 35mm film in the magnificent location setting. Chiswick House itself in West London is an elegant 18th century villa designed by the 3rd Earl of Burlington to showcase his art collections and entertain his friends. The Italian-styled house sits in magnificent gardens and is owned now by English Heritage and is available for visits by the public. Inside the conservatory and statue garden at Chiswick House, the band are seen miming to the song, using the location's architecture and gardens for visual effect. On the indoor shots, they wore dark suits and sunglasses, very distinctive actually. Notably, you will see Paul's chipped front tooth from a recent moped accident that he had in just outside Liverpool. Paul had taken a pretty significant fall on this moped and following the accident had instructed his brother Michael to photograph his injuries for posterity. The Chiswick House location gave the Beatles room to move, to walk in the grounds, to use the statues and greenery and the natural light. The camera work was relatively simple for the time, no big story, but interesting framing nevertheless by Michael Lindsay Hogg, and this served as a template for thousands of other videos that followed over the countless decades since. Despite Paul's injuries, I personally do not think that the Beatles have ever looked cooler than they did in these two video promotional films. The suits, the hair, the glasses are perfectly pitch style for the year 1966 and would also be a style template for the likes of the Gallaghers and Paul Weller and the Jam. The colour version of the video was prepared for the US market, notably the Ed Sullivan Show, while black and white versions were used here in the UK on shows like Ready Steady Go and Thank Your Lucky Stars. So what was the key aim of this promotional video? Well, it was to promote the single without having to physically appear in dozens of TV studios around the world. As George put it at the time, we decided we were not going to go into the TV studios to promote our records so much. We'd make our own little films and put them on the TV. So why do these promotional films matter? Well, they're arguably one of the earliest instances of a band commissioning dedicated promotional films that function like modern music videos. It shows the Beatles at a transitional moment, still a performance band, but slowly shifting away from regular live touring before they would actually stop later in the year, 1966, and embracing new forms of media. Paperback Writer is beautifully shot, especially the Chiswick House version, and gives us a really valuable visual record of the Beatles in action. It also underlines the band's massive global appeal and the need for new promotional strategies. So now let's look at Rain, and significantly, why did Rain get a promotional video as well? Rain was just the B-side to Paperback Writer, but significantly was treated almost like an A-side in terms of creative ambition. It was obvious that the Beatles considered this as an equal in terms of creative ambition, and that's why, with its sonic innovation in terms of the song with its backmasking and studio effects, this was considered to be a real important point to make. And it's one of the first videos ever shot for a B-side of a single. Like Paperback Writer, the indoor version at EMI Studio 1 was filmed on the 19th of May 1966 and on the 20th of May at Chiswick House. For the Chiswick House version of Rain, this was shot outside in the gardens, particularly around a very famous cedar tree, walking in the grounds and with children playing among its branches. The feel of Rain is much more loose than Paperback Writer, more atmospheric, the band walking around the garden, sitting, and using the surrounding natural environment to their benefit. This is much less of a structured performance-only set. The cedar tree shots are also very memorable and would also be used on the cover of the Nowhere Man EP. The indoor version of Rain at Abbey Road was very much a performance-based video with the band in their suits plus their sunglasses miming to the track. The colour version was again aimed at the US market. In the UK, we had to make do with the black and white version. The many variants of the two songs and their videos were very much investing in the visual medium. Rain's visual treatment signals that the Beatles were very, very comfortable in experimenting, not just performing on stage. The promo for Rain is often cited by historians as among the very first modern videos, because it's not just a stage performance, but location, mood, camera movement, all with the band miming, set a very important template. It also shows the shifts in the band's mindset, less touring, more creative control, more of a global strategy. So what do these videos tell us about the Beatles in 1966? Well, it was the end of the touring era. 1966 was their final year of major touring. These promos really reflect that shift. They can send their films all around the world rather than appear live anywhere. The Beatles were also very, very media savvy. They were ahead of many groups in recognising the importance of visual aspect of music, which would become such a major important factor. The fact that the studio had become an art tool had not been lost on the Beatles, and the fact that Rain had been so innovative using backward vocals and special mixing aligns with the fact that the promo could represent the band very differently. Promotional films were able to have global reach, and the need in the US for different broadcast versions pushed them into considering colour versions, location shooting, and higher production values. The band's image was also reflected in these videos. The visual style, the sunglasses, dark suits, the garden shots shows a way more mature, more deliberate presentation than the mop tops of 1964. These videos also build up legacy. These films have lasted. When the later generations look back at the Beatles' visual history, these promos are likely to be key chapters in their history. So some final thoughts. In the end, the promotional films for Paperback Writer and Rain are more than just marketing tools. They're time capsules. They capture the Beatles at a moment of change, from live touring giants to studio pioneers, from mop-top pop to higher artistic ambition, and from local UK band to global culture giants. They remind us that the Beatles didn't merely ride the wave of pop culture, they helped steer its direction. And while these films may appear simple today compared to modern MTV-style videos, MTV, do you remember that? Anyway, they were really, really bold for their time. If you've enjoyed this dive into these two songs and their videos, then be sure to give the video a like, and better still, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future content. Why not let me know what you think of the videos? Which ones do you prefer? Do you prefer the in-studio ones or the ones set at Chiswick House? I'll leave links to the videos in the description box below, so please do take a look. So as we're here wrapping up October and rushing into November, where awaiting us is going to be the new anthology album and the Wings LP. So please stay tuned to the channel and please subscribe if you haven't already done so. And I look forward to seeing you on the next video. Until then, it's bye for now.